Good morning, and this is Mrs. Wyrick with a video on how to evaluate negative exponents. So we're all pretty much familiar with this term right here, 7 squared. And we know that if we take 7 and we write it out as a product of factors, that would be 7 times 7, and that gives me 49. Well, there's something a little bit odd about this power, 7 to the negative second power, that makes it a little different than the 7 squared. This negative sign in front of my power tells me to take the inverse of 7 squared. So, in order to take the inverse of 7 squared, instead of making that equal to 49, it's going to equal 1 over 49. Remember, the inverse is whatever it is that I can multiply times its regular, so to speak, number that will make it equal 1. So in order to take the inverse of 7 squared, I would need to write it as a fraction under 1. Let's try this problem here. 1 over 6 to the negative second power. Remember, this negative sign tells me to take the inverse. So instead of 6 to the negative second power being on the bottom or in the denominator, we're going to move it up to the top. When we do that, my exponent becomes positive. Since there was already a 1 up there, I'll now be multiplying 1 times 6 to the positive second power. So 1 times 6 squared. All right, evaluate your exponents. 6 squared equals 36. 6 times 6. And 1 times 6 equals 36. So far, so good here. Now, what happens if you have a different number other than 1 in your numerator and a negative exponent in your denominator? Well, same rules apply. Since it's negative, I need to take the inverse. So since I had a 20 in my numerator, I'm going to need to write a 20. And when I flip or take that inverse of 3 to the negative second power, it becomes 3 to the positive second power, or 3 squared. Now, following the order of operations, 3 squared is 9 times 20. And 20 times 9, well, 9 times 2 is 18, and I can just add a 0. So my answer for this, when I evaluate 20 over 3 to the negative second power, is 180. Oh boy, you know Mrs. Wyrick likes to start challenging you. Things are going to get a little more difficult. Now I have a negative sign to each of my exponent, one in the numerator and one in the denominator. So what's that mean? Well, that means I flip my fraction. I take the inverse of it. This becomes 2 cubed over 4 cubed. And to evaluate this fraction, let's write out our powers as a product of factors. 2 cubed means 2 times 2 times 2 over 4 times 4 times 4. And when I evaluate that, 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 more is 8, over 4 times 4 is 16, times 4 more, which is 64. Now I need to check my fraction and see if I can simplify. 8 over 64. And guess what? I can. 8 is actually my greatest common factor for 8 and 64. So 8 goes into 8 one time, and 8 goes into 64 8 times. My answer to this is 1/8. Last but not least, you may be asked to solve for the exponent itself. Now remember, this exponent, since it's negative, tells me to take the inverse. So I'm going to rewrite this as 1 times 2 to the nth power equals 64. Now we have to think to ourselves, 2 raised to what power, then times 1, is going to equal 64. Well, let's try this out by trial and error. 2 times 2, that's 4, times 2 more is 8, times 2 more is 16, times 2 more is 32, times 2 more is 64. Now let's count how many times I had to use 2 as a factor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So n equals 6. Remember, you can always check your answer by putting your answer back into the original equation. If 1 over 2 to the negative 6th power equals 64, which it does, then your answer is correct.
Made with Doodlecast Pro.